a market expert in what they're doing. Some of the companies that we currently work with, and yeah, if these are just our contact details. If you want to scan those QR codes at any point, just if you want to get in contact with us. But being tech recruiters, it might I guess surprise you that we get involved with these tech meetups. There's a reason behind it though. Obviously, I've always said that there's a bit of a weird relationship between people in tech and recruiters that I don't think needs to exist, because for me, I always consider the people that I work alongside technically colleagues, right? We all work together, we all are trying to achieve something, which is to get incredible tech projects finished and make the world a little bit of a better place. This is kind of our way of giving back to the people that we work with day in, day out. Doing these events, they always end up being really cool. Here's some pictures from other events that we've done, and yeah, they're always really good fun, and I really enjoy meeting everyone. So thank you all for coming out. Yeah.
Cool. Yeah, and just to second what Aaron was saying, so this is obviously the first one that we've done in Swindon. So yeah, thanks to all of you for coming along. Thanks to the guys at Open Work Partnership for hosting this. Really lovely offices, really nice food, and yeah, really good talks to come up as well. So just to mention, we're always looking for new topics and new speakers as well. So if you have any suggestions, please do come and grab one of us. More than happy to hear you out and yeah, take on board any advice on future topics that you'd like to hear from us in the future. So.
And I think as well, particularly being our first one in Swindon, everyone here is local. If any of you have a talk that you want to do, please get in touch. We'd love to get a room full of people in here to listen to you talk on the topic you're passionate about. That would be really cool. So yeah, thanks for coming. And if you want to get in touch with us at any point, that's all of our contacts. So yeah, thanks.
Cool. So I think we'll hand over to David.
Yeah.
Yeah.
There we go. There's this.
Cool. Just 1 second. There should be a number behind it. There we go. 1 second. So don't want you to see my slides because I'll be giving the game away. Right, so yeah, so my name's David Brent. I head up the data engineering team here at Open Work. I'll go straight on to the next slide, which is my intro, if I can. It's going to let me. Come on, there we go. Yeah, so the agenda for tonight is just a brief introduction of myself and Open Work and what we do. We're going to be looking at where we came from with SSIS and SQL on-prem and everything that can be classed as like the old world now. Our transition to the cloud and data factory, the steps that we made and what we put in place to make that move to data factory. Then the switch to Synapse and the reasons why. So we'd got quite far down our route to using data factory, and we had to make a very quick switch to using Synapse pipelines instead, and we'll go into exactly why that was. And then our future and some of the cool things that we've got to come. So, no, wrong way, here we go, sorry about this. So who am I? So my name's David Bryn. I've been working with SQL since SQL 6.5 back in the 90s. Every version since. I started working with Azure back in 2013, when the maximum size of an Azure SQL database, I think, was 100 meg back then, and you had to shard your data across. So it's back in the started very at the beginning. I've been working with Microsoft Technologies for all this time. Very passionate about learning and doing these events and attending these events. But I head up a team of 5, so that none of them are here tonight, which is not very good, but I'm recording, so I'll see this on the recording. So, team of 5, so we've got 3 data engineers. We've got Sam, Richard and Patrick. We've got Wendy, who's our data analyst, and then we've got Dave, who's the tester. So the data engineers are kind of the hands, Wendy's the brains, the tester just tells us off all the time. So yeah, that's who we are. So a little bit about where we came from. So one other thing is I've got third time lucky there for the Open Work Partnership. So I'm a repeat offender when it comes to open work. So I was the DBA in 29 to 2012. Then I went contracting because all the team I was working with were contractors and they were earning more money than me. So I went away and I was a contractor for 10 years. Then I came back to open work as a contractor for 2 years again. And then I left again, and then I had a call one day saying, you want to come back as a permie? And I said, yeah, I'd love to come back. It's a fantastic place to be. And here I am. I've been back about 18 months now, so. And I keep on scrolling the wrong way. So the Open Work Partnership is primarily a SQL environment. Even back in the day when I was the DBA, everything was SQL. It was SQL Server, SSI, back at even older than that, DTS packages that were then converted to SSIS, lots of SSRS, so everything, all of the features of a SQL instance. And the skills in-house, the development skills, are predominantly SQL as well. Everybody loves writing SQL code. A lot of the people around the business, they've got SQL skills that they can output data, often into Excel, which is a bone of contention, but then they can modify that data. So when I came back as a contractor, we were looking at a new data warehouse project that was going to be cloud-based. So we had to make sure that everything that was done, we couldn't go for the latest, greatest fancy technology because of the skills were in-house. We had to build what we were building for the skills and the experience we had. So when I came back, there was a demand to move to Data Factory and to migrate the logic and the ways of working from SSIS to Data Factory. Before I go too deep into this, can we have a show of hands of everybody that knows SSIS? Cool. And Data Factory? And Synapse? Awesome. Right. So it's just, the reason I've asked that is I've done a session on Synapse before and I didn't read the room and I got to the end and nobody had ever used it before. So at least I kind of know the level of experience. So SSIS is just an orchestration tool. It moves data from A to B. But SSIS, in my opinion, wasn't great at modifying and transforming that data in flight. So the old method, or the method at OpenWork, and the method in a lot of places, is that you use SSIS as an orchestration tool to lift and shift your data from source normally into a database, in say a raw schema or a location where you're going to modify it. You would then take that data as you landed it and you'd run store procedures against it. So you'd write code against that to write your output that's then used for reporting or for a data warehouse or whatever. So when we first used Data Factory, we had the same kind of mentality. We need to get our data from on-prem, we need to land that into a database in the cloud, but we're going to use a different tool to do it. So we'd changed the tools, but we hadn't changed our mindset. We were still doing things the old way. And it kind of worked, but we had really small volumes of data for the project that was being run. I think even still, there was an overnight batch that was taking about 6 hours to run. So it was not as efficient as it could have been. So when I returned back to work as the head of data engineering, we started asking some questions. So we're using all these infinite resources in the cloud, in Azure. And we're landing our data in a tiny Azure database, and then we're processing it. And why are we doing that? It's taken such a long time. We started actually questioning the rules behind what we're doing. The benefits of moving to the cloud, because a lot of people go, right, we want to move to the cloud. Well, why? The benefits that we could see at that time were the fact that you've got pretty much infinite capacity in the cloud, greatly reduced costs as long as you get it right. So there was a real drive to move to the cloud, use tools that existed in the cloud. And I say here, like many organisations, the standard design approach was to use SIS as orchestration, SQL to model and shape the data, often with stored procs, so that the data would be presented via SSRS and Excel. And then we started the transition to use Data Factory. Still using the same kind of mentality and methodology. So we took the standard approach. Another reason for that was because of like the developers were used to this method of working. They were used to writing stored procedures, and it was their comfort zone. We had a couple of well-seasoned developers, I'd say, that didn't want to change what they were doing. They were like, this is how we do it, this is how we always do it. So we were kind of stuck with that initially with ADF. So we switched the orchestration tool to Data Factory and set up a self-hosted integration, which is just like it's a method of connecting from the cloud, Data Factory, to your data on-prem. So we could pull data from on-prem into the cloud, into the database and model and shape it. So the databases were changed from SQL Server to Azure SQL, but the modeling and everything, the methods remained the same. The connectivity was tested for the data to be visualized within Power BI. The other thing we found was we had Power BI developers, they also like to connect to a database. That's what they've always done. So at the time we were like, oh, we could land this data somewhere else and you can connect to that. No, we had to do this in baby steps to prove that it works, and then go on to the next and on to the next. And we were steaming along with it, ahead with this, when we found we had a message from Microsoft. We used a technological replication in Dynamics to move our data from Dynamics pretty much immediately into a database, into a SQL database. We had a message from Microsoft last summer, saying we're switching off replication. You've got to use Synapse to reproduce this. We are so dependent on replication of the data coming out of Dynamics. That was like, it would have caused a world of problems. So we spun up the Synapse environment, instances, and we moved the functionality from this replication database into Synapse. So it's like happy days, we saved the world, we've got past that problem. The issue was we had Synapse that's got pipelines, which are orchestration tools, and then we had Data Factory. So it means that we've got two orchestration tools in an environment. It just doesn't make sense. So it was a little bit of work, but what we did was we moved everything that we had. We got a framework we used. We moved all of the objects we had in Data Factory. We moved those into Synapse. So it means we've only got one orchestration tool now. So it was like we were kind of forced down that route a little bit. But soon after it was kind of forced that we had to use the pipelines. But I'll be honest, as soon as we moved to Synapse, it was kind of like, why didn't we do this in the first place? Because Synapse offers you so much more than just pipelines. So Synapse is a collection of Microsoft tools that were brought together under the umbrella of a product called Synapse. So you've got a version of Azure Data Factory, you've got a version of Databricks, maybe a little bit rounded down version of Databricks, and you've got a data lake, all within the same service. So it meant that as soon as we moved the pipelines over to Synapse, we then started looking at the data lake that was offered in Synapse as well. Not only that, we then started we looked at notebooks, but the problem with notebooks is we would need to refactor a lot of the stuff that we've already created, and there'll be a bit more work. So we switched over to Synapse, and we still did things the same way. We still landed the data in the database, and then we modeled it with stored procedures. And we had another piece of functionality that meant we had to land about 200 gigs worth of data, a massive data set. And we tried doing it this way. We landed it, we copied it into the database. It took 7.5 hours to run. And it was like, myself and one of the other data engineers looked at each other at this point and went, this is nuts, this is crazy. So we went down the route of testing every option there is in Synapse, because one thing you'll find in Synapse, if you want to do something, there are multiple ways of doing the same thing. And if you ask anybody, if you ask Microsoft which is the best way, you'll get the standard Microsoft response, it depends. So because of that, we tested and tested and tested, and we found the most efficient way of creating this one piece of functionality was to read the data into the lake and have a notebook that models and shapes that data in the lake. So it means you land it once, you don't copy it anywhere. you model and process that data, which means we did need to rewrite the store procedures as notebooks, and there were quite a few issues around writing those notebooks. Things like a lot of stuff had to be case sensitive for it to work. If you run a merge statement, it had to be case sensitive, otherwise it just doesn't do anything. Lots of little gotchas like that. But we recreated our first couple of notebooks, and we took this process that's taken over 7 hours to run, and it took 90 seconds. So, massive win. Then we were dancing around the office after we got that working, because it was just like, it was one of the yay moments. So we also, at that point, we'd kind of defined our new method of working. And there were a couple of the developers, the old school developers, that we kind of, how can you not be convinced if you take something over 7 hours to 90 seconds, how can you not be convinced that's better? So we started then kind of winning like hearts and minds and showing people this is the way we should do things. And it was really at that point that the technology now was there, but it was we were using it as it should be used. And that, I think it's really easy to go, okay, right, as a company, we're going to move from on-prem, SSIS, RS and AS, if you're using it, we're going to move that to the cloud. Happy days. But are you changing the way you work? And if you're not, why not? Because the benefits are huge. So then over the previous year, the Azure Setup Service has delivered loads. We've now got 120 notebooks that provide data to the business from a pipeline framework of only 27 pipelines, 33 data sources, but we've got 302 sets of parameters. So we've got one rule in data engineering, is that we never create anything just once for one particular use. So what we've done is we've got a framework that we've got a connection for a type, we've got a linked service for a type. So say SQL Server, but we parameterize everything. So if you're writing from SQL Server to SQL Server, use the same connections, the same objects. You just one set of parameters for your source, another set of parameters for your destination. And that's why the environment we got is unbelievably efficient. It's beautiful if I say so, but that's what he said. And the future and the cool things to come. So we're far from perfect at the moment. We've now, I think we're in a position where we've defined the tools we're going to use, we've defined how we're going to use those tools. Now we've got the bit that isn't such fun of moving all that tech debt that's built in the old world and bringing that into the new. And I think that's probably going to be years worth of work. But I think now everything we're building is kind of built for the future. So the way we're landing all of our files now, we're landing our files as Delta files, which means we can use streaming data in the future if we need to, so real-time analytics. We're looking at partitioning our data so we can make it as efficient as it can be, and also applying that with an archiving strategy, an automatic archiving strategy or tiering strategy that means we'll save even more money. What else have we? Yeah, and we've still got two databases that we use, Azure SQL databases that we're trying to get rid of. And are now classed as technical debt. We've got our config database, sits in Azure SQL, and we're working on moving that into the lake. So it means that the benefit in doing that means that if everything's in your data lake, so your config, your pipelines, your notebooks, it means then you can easily take that, because it's connected to source control, we can take that, parameterize the names for it, and spin up, say, a sandbox environment in a couple of seconds. So that's important, we want to get that in. And we've also got an Azure SQL database to present data to Power BI. So we're working with those same Power BI developers, and we've got them on board now. We've shown them that data lake is better, it's more efficient, and it works. So we're working on them. The other thing that a key improvement that we're looking at making at the moment is we're doing full drop and reloads of our data from source every night. And anybody that works with data will probably go, whoa, it's not the way to do things. So we've got a whole load of source systems that we haven't got identifiers for incremental loads. So we're using change data capture, bringing that data in incrementally, landing that in the lake, merging that with the data we've already got, and I think we'll reduce our Azure costs massively, and we'll improve our efficiency, and then be able to offer real-time analytics in the future as well. So, have I missed anything? Data sources. So I've spoken a lot about the data sources that we've got on-prem, which are SQL Server. But that SQL Server connections in Synapse have been around probably since day one. But we're looking at connecting to now. We've got a direct connection to Dynamics. We've got connections to APIs of various different authentication methods. We can connect to any connector that exists within the Synapse pipelines. We can connect to. We can parameterize, and we can not increase the number of pipelines we've got vastly. And one question that always comes up is, but what about Fabric? What about Microsoft Fabric? Because everybody's talking about that at the moment. It seems to be like the buzzword on LinkedIn. I've had a look at Fabric, but in my opinion, I think it seems to be more like Power BI, where it's a service that Microsoft offer. That is kind of you set it up, you use it, you don't have a huge amount of control around it. And I think the way that we work at OpenWork is, because everything's parameterized and we're a very technical data engineering team, it means we want more control over what we're doing. We want to be able to take this data, model and shape it, load it from here to here, and we want to be able to define those steps more than we could do with Fabric. So even though it's kind of the buzzword at the moment, if you're technical and you're working with data, I would suggest looking at Synapse. And if there are techies in the room, I can talk about this stuff for days. So if you want another session on Synapse, I'm more than willing to help anybody out. That's me. I think that's the last slide. Any questions?
Yeah. Simple little question. What is a notebook?
A notebook is how do you define it's logic that exists it's a Jupyter file, a Jupyter notebook. So it's just in Synapse, it's a file that exists that contains logic for data movements or data modifications. So in Azure Synapse, you've got your pipelines that you use for moving data from A to B. You've got your notebooks. So with your notebooks, they're written in. We tend to write them in Scala and SQL, but you can write your notebooks in Python, Scala, R, SQL, C#, I think. And it's just an easy way of running code against the data that you've got in your lake. If you're a SQL person and you don't want to, I'd say if you're a SQL person, I'd say within a day, you could probably read enough Scala or Python to be able to connect to a database, bring in a data set, and then use your SQL skills to model and shape that data. So, yeah.
So my question is about, that was obviously a pretty radical transformation, and that must have a sort of commensurate radical transformation on the sort of financial operations. So all of a sudden you're paying subscriptions, pay as you go potentially. That must have had a huge impact on the company and the way it worked.
No, not really, because everything we're using, you only pay for when you're actually using it. So say for example, if you spin up a Synapse environment, you won't pay a penny for it until you actually start moving data, or you start running notebooks using compute. So we found it really easy to set up. There was the business demand for Synapse was because we needed to move to that technology to replace the replication that was being removed. But I think even the cost involved in setting up that replication was minimal. We were talking before we actually started chucking loads of data into it. We got a dev environment and we've got an ADF environment, and they cost less than £300 a month. We've got a production environment that costs probably 10 times more than that, but that's primarily because we're doing the full drop and reloads of data. So I think I think if you build this right from the beginning, the risk is low, is very low, because you can spin up all the environment that you need. You can spin up everything you need. You won't pay a penny for it. It'll only be when you start using that. But then what you can also do is we keep a really close eye on the costs, so we know if there's any spikes. So, give an example. We've got a table that we need to load this 100 million rows. So we kind of know to pre-warn the infrastructure head that there might be a bit of a spike coming. So things like that, it's very easy to quantify. But what I suggest is go to azure.microsoft.com. If you haven't done already, create yourself a free Azure account. You can create a Synapse environment, you can create your databases, you get loads of free credits, and do that so you can kick the tires and learn what it does. So, yeah.
You said about Fabric. Do you not think that using Fabric in the future will become more powerful because of its AI integrations?
I'm not convinced.
You don't think it will work?
No. Who was I speaking to? I was speaking to someone that said that Microsoft is skipping over Fabric for Synapse, for seasoned data engineering teams and for seasoned organisations. And to be honest, if they're bringing AI to Fabric, there's no reason why you can't bring AI to Synapse.
That's true.
And also, because Synapse, because you've got the data lake behind where you land all your data, there's nothing to stop you. Once you landed that data in Synapse, you can just use AI over the top of your data lake. I think we're already looking at using ML models, machine learning and data science over the top of that lake, which, to be honest, I think is what data lake's kind of created for. We're going down a route where we want to do machine learning, but then we also want to use Power BI, and we want our users to slice and dice that data. So what we're doing is we're landing all the data in raw, and we take that data and we literally copy it, narrows down at the same, just not any PII or sensitive data, to another container that data scientists use. And they can use that data to their heart's content and build their models and whatever. But then we've got another set of notebooks that take that same data from raw, and it models it into a dimensional model within Synapse. Because the other thing that you can do in Synapse is you can, say for example, I don't know how many of you are aware with like dimensional modelling, like dimensions and facts, but what you can do, so if you had a data warehouse, say in a relational database, you would create your dimensions, you would create your facts, you would then put your relationships in place that join those together. One of the problems with the data lake up until recently was you could land those same entities as Parquet files, as objects in the lake, but you didn't have your referential integrity to make sure that data was kept like consistent. But now there's something called a lake database in Synapse. So what you do is you land your model data, you land that in the lake, and then you have it's almost like a presentation layer over the top that acts as your database. And you can put in your foreign keys, your primary keys, your relationships, any constraints you can put in there. So it gives you the power of a relational database, but over the top of your data lake, and you don't need to copy your data. I tell you, it is awesome. It's just, it's one of the things that Microsoft's done that is really cool. And I think if we had to move away from that to, say, Fabric, and not have that kind of same level of control, I think we'd be doing ourselves, it wouldn't benefit. We'd have to identify the benefits of using Fabric. So, cool. Like I said, I hope I haven't talked too much.
Alright guys, we'll take a quick 5-minute break if you guys want to go grab drinks, food, go to the toilet quickly or anything, and then we can come back in here for a second talk. Awesome. Thanks everyone. And then I was like, I don't understand what I'm doing. Do you mind if I?
Yeah, no worries.
That's really good talk.
Yeah.
Really good. Really enjoyed it. Really well delivered.
Yeah, cool.
Okay. It was the day. So, then this is, yeah, oh shit, she was right. And this is me on the train on the way to doing the talk, making the talk. So yeah, that was pretty last minute, but we got through, and now we have the talk, which is great. So yeah, I'm not a professional developer at all. This is all just a hobby to me. Never been a professional developer. So yeah, it's just stuff I do for fun in my spare time. I think I'm a lot funnier than I am. So some of the jokes don't land. Can you just laugh to make me feel better about myself? That would be really, really kind of you. Code Garden is going to come up a lot in this. Now, for all of you in the room who don't know, Code Garden is an international conference about Umbraco, which is the technology I'm committed to. And it happens in Denmark every year. And I went to it this year, and it was really sick. And I'm just going to talk about it a lot because it was really sick, and I like talking about it to anyone that I meet, pretty much. So yeah, who am I? There's a nice picture of me. I'm a tech enthusiast. And I guess what I mean by that is, also I might not be a professional developer. I love code, I love tech, all things tech, whether it be engineering, electronics, physics, right from robotics all the way through to, even like Azure Synapse, like that's what we were just doing. I might not understand some of the stuff, but it's something that I can get hype about, and I really enjoy that stuff. I'm a tech meetup organizer, as you hopefully know, coming to this event. Organise a number of different meetups around the country, including .NET Cardiff, .NET Southwest, help organise on Bristol, Cheltenham was a tech meetup. There's a lot more, it gets very tiring. So yeah, thanks for coming out, that makes all of it worth it. I'm a massive anime nerd, so if anyone in the room is into anime and has any good recommendations, please come and find me at the end, because always looking for my next anime. I'm a fluent Japanese speaker, and I'll prove it to you, even though none of you will understand what I'm saying. So none of you know what I said. I could have been making up gibberish, but that's the proof that I'm a Japanese speaker. I'm a .NET and Umbraco tech recruiter, which I appreciate is a word that some developers hold as a curse. Really fell in love with it, and then yeah, the natural conclusion to that obviously is not to become a developer, it's to become a tech recruiter, right? That's the natural progression from tech to men. Yeah, cool. As a recruiter, I got to partner with some of the Umbraco Gold partners and now Umbraco Platinum partners and work on some Umbraco roles. And that got me really involved and invested in the tech. So I used to be just pure .NET recruitment, but when I worked on those roles, really fell in love with that kind of ecosphere, and so I decided that I wanted to recruit within that as a niche. And as a part of that, one of my clients really kindly invited me along to a hackathon because they knew that I was a developer as well. So yeah, they invited me along to a hackathon, and I asked them, should I turn up? And they were like, we'll try and get you a pull request by the end of the day. And you'll see why that was a ridiculous statement to make. But I fell in love with Umbraco and the community, like I said, that ecosphere, and then I decided to make Umbraco my entire personality. So if any of you talk to me from now on and the words Umbraco don't come out of my mouth, that's because I'm trying really hard not to talk about it. So yeah, what is Umbraco? Now, I'm lucky enough to be friends with a guy called Carl Sarganar. He is a multi-Umbraco MVP, and what that means is he's been recognised. There's only 83 of them in the world out of all the Umbraco developers, been recognised multiple times for his contribution to the space and for his work. He was the ex-tech director of a number of digital agencies, currently manages his own more small-scale agency. So I had the absolute honour of asking him, the master, if you will. And the answer he gave me was just so precise and incredible that I couldn't put it in better words myself. Yeah. That was pretty much the word for word. He was like, I don't have an answer for that, ask ChatGPT. But he is the master. He is the master. So, got to listen to his advice. So I did ask ChatGPT. And on the day that I asked ChatGPT, it had a bit of an attitude problem. I might have been using GPT-2 rather than GPT-3. I don't know how that happened. I was like, come on, man. It gave me an answer. And, you can read. But essentially, what Umbraco is a content management system. And what that means is if you're a business and you mostly deal in content, which is pretty much 90% of businesses who have a web platform, it allows you to very easily organize and push that content and give the power to non-developers to kind of maintain the website themselves by just pushing content blocks. So now your marketers can get involved, your publicists can get involved, your article writers can get involved. Essentially give it to the marketing team. We'll make the functionality, you guys manage the website, right? Give people the strength to do what they want to do. So that's the tech. And that brings us to part one of the talk, which is hubris. Now, I'm going to try not to sound patronising here, but I actually have been pointed out to me that not everyone knows what hubris means. So if you all know, I'm sorry, but it basically means arrogance. Think of Icarus flying too close to the sun. And yeah. Oh, I don't know how that got in there. That's so embarrassing. There's some photos of me in Denmark at that sick international conference. Sorry, guys. So embarrassing. But yeah, can you raise your hand if you're in the room and you've gone to a hackathon or any sort of like event like that, and if you've contributed to an open source project? Can you raise your hand? Cool. Keep your hands raised. That's a trap, because now I'm going to put you into audience participation. So yeah, basically, I guess if you were going to go to a hackathon, if you were going to go to a open source contribution or try and make an open source contribution, what are like some bare minimums that you think that you should kind of have going into that?
Define goal.
Okay, cool. Define goal.
Code of conduct.
Code of conduct. Interesting. Yeah, good answer. Give one more.
No.
Alright, fine. That's fair. So yeah, the fine goal is an interesting one. So I think skills is probably pretty important. So like if you're going to go and contribute to like, say, you know, like a .NET library or something like that, you should probably know a little bit about the library, and at least know .NET, I imagine. Also, a laptop and tools, so you should probably bring your laptop with the IDE that you're going to use downloaded onto it and all of that sort of stuff. A team, not necessary, but it's nice to have a team of people who you can work on a problem with. Maybe a buddy who you're going to like kind of do a bit of pair programming with. Some ideas and research, like you said, a goal, so some idea. You've probably researched the open contribution like suggestions before, and you know what problem you're going to roughly try and solve. Necessary APIs and documentation, probably have read through the documentation for the thing that you're trying to contribute to. And I didn't have any of those, so you can see how it was really arrogant of me to turn up and think I was going to make a pull request by the end of the day. As we go down, I guess, re-skills, didn't know a lick of .NET or Angular by the time I turned up there. I didn't even know that a floating date type in .NET, you have to put a little F at the end. That was like the level of my .NET capability when I went there. Angular, I learned a little bit on that day, and I hate it. But yeah, didn't know any Angular. I turned up without Visual Studio because I use Visual Studio Code, and I thought that would be sufficient. Turns out that apparently that's a big no-no, and you gotta have Visual Studio if you're doing any .NET programming. Didn't know anyone that I was at the event when I turned up. Had not even looked at the open tickets or contribution tickets, and hadn't even used Umbraco or spun up an Umbraco environment one time in my entire life. So what I did have turning up was a laptop. If I hadn't had that, it would have been really true. Some Python and web programming. So I've done a bit of JavaScript, a bit of HTML, a bit of CSS, a little bit of React. So I kind of understood the basics of object-oriented all the way through to object-oriented and that sort of stuff. So the construct of programming, as you will, and the basics of how web programming works. And I had a dream, and it might not have been Martin Luther King level, but it was a pretty big dream. And that dream was to end the day on a pull request. It was very important that I did that. And I still managed to do it. I actually did manage to pull it off, just so you know. I did get a pull request. This is a happy story. I didn't turn up with no results. It took me an hour to install Visual Studio. That was a nightmare. And then as well, once I'd installed Visual Studio, I went through all the instructions on downloading Umbraco as a database, tried to spin it up on my computer, got 100 errors because on these computers it localizes everything in a OneDrive, and you don't have the permissions to access those files to spin stuff up. So I had to troubleshoot with all the developers in the room to figure that out until I finally changed the root. It was a whole thing. Yeah, there we go. The permission errors installing Umbraco, that was another 2 hours. So 3 hours in, I'm not even looking at the code. I'm not even looking at the code yet. I haven't even looked at the GitHub. But after I was on the system, I looked through all of the current issues and I picked an easy one. And there's a bit of a shout out to Umbraco for this, because they have this little tag here for some of the issues called Good First Issue, which reads for plebs. And essentially that means if you haven't worked on the code base before, it's a nice first easy puzzle. And I chose based on the issue of I kind of understood how the functionality of that problem works, basically. I worked my way through the code base, errors are still way, way out of my depths, right? Like, absolutely out of my depth. And that brings me on to part 2, which is learning. So how do you learn an entirely new programming language in a day? Not 1, 2, 3. Actually, no, yeah, 3. Umbraco, Angular, and .NET. 3 new whole technologies in just one day. Well, the first thing is, you've got to use what you know, right? Like, I did have some background in code. That's how I even picked the issue that I was going to work on. Pick something that you kind of have a bit of familiarity with. Second thing is, you don't have to learn the whole thing. Like, I still don't know a lot about Umbraco, to be honest with you. I still don't even really know what an interface is in .NET. Like, I don't really know what that functionality is, but I don't need to use it, so who cares, right? I just solve one problem at a time, and like, we all know this. Like whether you're a junior developer or whether you're like the most seasoned developer in the world, you know that you take a problem, you break it down into its smallest components, and you solve one problem at a time, and that's how you solve any problem. And the most important thing for me was rely on the experts. That was real important. And for me, that is the most important skill. You got to get good at asking questions, because if you're dumb, then you're going to be asking a lot of them. And if you're not good at it, it's going to be really annoying. So do some research before. Like, I think that it's probably really annoying. Like, and I assume some of the senior developers in the room have had this experience where someone's asking you a question and you can tell they just haven't thought about it at all. And I imagine that's a frustrating experience. So, try and think about the person you're asking the question to a little bit. Do a little bit of research. It's like we've all been flamed on, Stack Overflow for asking a question without putting any attempt of solving the problem whatsoever. 10,000 lines votes. Come with what you've tried. Be specific about the problem that you're trying to solve. And if you're being asked a question, and I think this one's for the senior developers, there's a guy, Richard Jackson, who I know, who does great talks on empathy within the coding world and the kind of role that empathy plays. I think if you're being asked a question, it's really nice if you can give someone a bit of time and genuinely give them the time, not just I just do this. Do you know what I mean? Just to genuinely sit down with them and go, hey, okay, this is what you do, this is why you do it, do you understand that? And then they go, not entirely, can you explain this bit? Giving someone that time really will make their day a lot better, and hopefully make your day a bit better as well. You feel good about yourself helping someone. And that brought me on to part 3, which is making friends. Because, when you ask people lots of questions like that, you kind of get to make friends with them. So this is kind of how contribution helps you make friends. I turned up to a hackathon where I only knew one person who was my client, and he was running the whole event, so he was super busy. I didn't know anyone else there at all. And I left the hackathon with some new friends. So this is Richard, that's Benji, that is Muslim, and in the back there is Sean. I'm made friends with all these people at this hackathon, and I still talk to them regularly today. It was really good, and we get on really well, and they come to my meetup sometimes. And I meet Benji at events, like that one in Denmark that I went to, and it's really, really fun. I had significant help from all of these people. If it wasn't for them, I would not have got this pull request finished. That would have been a nightmare. And contribution's a perfect way to have a reason to speak to someone, because, like you said, you can be asking them a question about some code. You're kind of all there for the same purpose. It's a really easy segue into a conversation. And you all know that you have a common interest at a hackathon or something like that. So at one of these meetups, everyone in here is a developer of some sort. So you can talk about development. It's an easy conversation point before you broach into really heated discussions about other stuff. So yeah, and the Umbraco community is really friendly to its credit, which was a massive help. So here's my little tip to make friends fast, and you'll have to again forgive some patronization here, but this is how I make friends at every meetup I go. Hi, I'm Eric.
Hi, Richie.
Nice to meet you, Richie. What do you do?
I watch demonstrations and talks.
Oh, I love that. That is phenomenal. Thanks. We can clap for Richie, please. Awesome. All right. So it's literally as easy as that. It genuinely is, and I know that sounds like I'm simplifying the problem, especially because some people suffer with social anxiety and are maybe more shy, but not most people in the world, when you just introduce yourself to them, especially if you're at an event that's essentially a social event, are not going to turn around and be a dick, right? That would be weird behavior if they were, and pushing yourself out there like that is really important, and I think it's super important. Because like I said, some people do suffer with shyness and some people do suffer with social anxiety, and they'll come to an event like this and let's be honest, you'll either have a group that you already have, or you'll come with some friends, or you'll find someone very quickly, and then you just kind of stay in that little group because this is the safe zone where there's no need to test any risks. But there might be someone who's kind of just on their own, right? And they're too shy to jump into something or feeling too socially awkward, right? So my rule is try to speak to at least one new person at every event, because it's easy to fall back into old habits and easy to fall back into old patterns. And I don't know, maybe it's because I'm an extrovert, but I just believe like the world is so much richer when you talk to like lots and lots of people and get to have all of these new experiences and learn about them. And be mindful of those with social anxiety, because like I said, like they're going to come to these events and they might not have as fun a time because like they feel a little bit like alone or in the out group, and that's always been sad to me. I've always thought that that's a real shame. So if you see someone standing alone, bring them into your group, man. Just like get them involved, talk to them. It makes everyone a lot happier. So, I've talked a lot about this contribution, but what did I actually contribute? That's the most important part. I'm sure that you've all been thinking about that since the start of the evening, since you got into the car park. You're like, what was Aaron's contribution to this open source project? And I'm a visual learner, so I've made a little video for you. I made this at 2 o'clock in the morning, the day before I did this talk the first time. You can see a pattern here. And it took me 4 hours to make 2 minutes. So here you go. Oh, we not the snap. Right. There we go. Thanks everybody, thank you. So yeah, I mean, speak for themselves really, don't they, honestly. Yeah, that was pretty much the exact same reaction in the room as well. If you still don't get it, this was basically what took me 7 hours of my day. So I essentially changed this to use a little localization service, and then it uses like a function that kind of like just brings in this as a tag, and it just localizes it into the language, and it's a tiny little UI adjustment. And look, how important is like my contribution? Like how important is that as a contribution to the database? Some have called me a prodigy, actually. Some have said it was the most fundamentally important contribution in the Umbraco database whatsoever. Not me. Other people were definitely talking about it, like a lot of people. Actually, it's really funny. I did this talk at an Umbraco event, and they said all you did was make the database a little bit slow, or make the program a little bit slower. So that was very humbling. Like, I'm joking, but I guess the point is like, sure, like the contribution's not that big deal, right? It's like a small UI change, and it took me 7 fucking hours to do. And by the way, that was heavily ghost-written by senior developers around me. I pretty much didn't even write the lines of code. I'm just making that bit up. Like, I had the idea, and they were like, and then I took it to a senior developer. He was like, yeah, that's what you do. And I was like, cool, thanks, man. 7 hours, 7 hours. And it's a small contribution, right? But like, that's kind of the point of open source contribution, isn't it? That like, senior developers with a lot of talent, they're probably solving the bigger problems in that database. They don't need to be solving those small UI issues, right? That's why it's cool. Anyone of any like level can get involved, solve some issue or another, and with all those little small 1% improvements, the product gets just so much better over time to the point where everyone using it has a better experience. It's community driven. Everyone's solving problems that they believe are problems that need to be solved. And if I made the UI a little bit friendlier for some people, that is good enough for me. And so like here are the key takeaways for me. Contribute like even if you think you have nothing to offer. As I said, I turned up with nothing. Like literally nothing. You could not have turned up less prepared than me unless you had never seen a line of code in your entire life, in which case fair play to you, that's some serious balls. But if you don't have anything to offer, you don't feel you do, you still probably do. Like you'd be surprised. Contribute to learn new things. I didn't know what Angular was MVC model and really fucking horrific before I turned up that day, but by the end of it, I knew I hated Angular. And you know, I didn't know anything about .NET, but by the end of it, I'd installed Umbraco. I was kind of figuring out how it looks, how it works, and getting a feel for a technology I recruit for every day, which is important, right? And you know, contribute to make friends. Like I said, I walked away with some really great friends from that event. Friends that I've met at multiple conferences and meetups since, including that one in Denmark, really sick. So yeah, contribute to make the world a better place. And I really believe in this, right? Like, how many of us in this room rely on some form of open source tool? I bet everyone at some point, right, has used some open source tool within their tech life. That's only made better by people like the people in this room contributing to those projects. And that's the cool thing about the development world is, like, people just do shit for free. They just make cool stuff for free. No, like, ulterior motive, no, like, profit-making service. We all just get together and we go, there's a problem we should collectively solve, and then solve it. And I think that that's amazing. I went to Code Garden in Denmark. It was really cool, just so you know. Okay. So yeah, shout out to the Umbraco community as well. They're a very cool tech for web building. If you do have, like, a content-based system you want to make, I think it's absolutely amazing, although I'm a little bit biased. They really are the friendliest community. As you see, I got a little friendly sticker from one of the conferences. And yeah, thanks to obviously Benji, Richard, Muslim, and Sean for, like, their help on the day. There are some semi-local Umbraco events. There's not really anything in the Midlands, but in Wales you've got Umbracaimru. In Bristol you have Bristol. Both of those happen, I think, monthly. And then you have, like, the Umbraco Festival in London and Umbraco Spark in Bristol once a year. And then if you do want to pay the money to go to Denmark, it is very, very cool. And that one was serious. It is actually really, really cool. They have an Umbraco Discord if you want to get involved and meet some people in the community, and everyone's really, really nice on it. And yeah, cool. This is, like, some links to feedback and socials. I really do appreciate feedback if anyone would take the time to give me some, because it's like I've improved some of this talk on iterations just from that feedback. All my socials there if you want to grab any of them, but if anyone has any questions. People don't normally have questions because it's not that type of talk, so it's okay if you don't. Cool. Oh yeah?
Have you compared Umbraco with any other CMS systems?
Not like first hand in terms of not being a developer, but I've spoken to enough Sitecore, Episerver, and Umbraco and Sitefinity developers to learn kind of the differences between the techs. I read a lot of articles on them and keep up. And whilst I think things like Sitecore, for example, might be better at an enterprise level, realistically, unless you're using all of the personalization features within it, which allow you to target very specific customer profiles and use a lot of, like, kind of personalization of content to serve them very specific content to who they are, there's not really much benefit to the £100,000 per year price tag. Umbraco is free. It can very much scale to enterprise level, especially with all of the open source packages that people create. And because it's so extendable, realistically, if you have a talented enough team, you can add a lot of the raw functionality that you need yourself and save a lot of cost in the process. So for me, it just seems to be the no-brainer. And I think that recently it got the best CMS, won the best CMS in Europe, or, like, the most utilized CMS. So yeah, if you're looking for content management systems, for me it's the gold standard. Not to say that Sitecore and all that doesn't have its place, they're all also very good systems. So yeah, cool. Any other questions? Awesome. Well, thanks very much, guys. Really appreciate that. Yeah, that's me. And also, because I don't remember if I said it at the beginning or not, but I really want to give a massive thanks to the Open Work Partnership for hosting us all tonight. Been really, really good. Obviously, fantastic office space. First event in Swindon, so that's really cool that it's been successful. Thanks for everyone coming. But can we just give a clap to the Open Work Partnership? Awesome. Thanks, guys. All right, cool. I think drinks and food are still there. If people want to kind of, like, mingle before you head off.